Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. I'm so glad you're joining us today because we have a powerful show to you. Uh-oh. Redoing. Welcome to Whoops, glasses falling off. Bill's laughing at me. Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner. I'm so glad you're joining us because we have a really important show for you today. We start out talking about the power of pride, what happened with Pride Month and why Pride Month needs to be every month. After that, we dive into a new study about the power of unpaid care and how it brings $1.1 trillion into our economy. Following that segment, we look at a new uprising, familiesfirstnow.org, and how you can get involved. And we close the show talking about the power of your story, our story, my story, and complex stories in changing the narrative and changing minds. We're going to jump right in with our first guest. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We're so glad that you're joining us right now. We have a spectacular guest joining us, Preston Mitchum, who is CEO of PDM Consulting. Welcome, Preston.
Thank you so much. So excited to be here.
I'm really excited that you're here because, hello, it is summer, and summer includes June. And in June, we recognized Pride Month. And I'm wondering if you could share with us some reflections on how pride is a form of protest, especially during this current ridiculously, bizarrely damaging administration.
All important adjectives. Yes. I am really happy to talk about this, right? Because I think pride, has for a while been seen as corporatized and with rainbow flags and parades. And sure, there's a part of that that is true, particularly in the latter half of the past 10 years. But for those of us who've really been studying pride, who've been celebrating pride, who've been discussing pride, we always want to discuss how pride has always been and still is rooted in protest, right? From the Stonewall Uprising in 1969, which was led by Black and Brown trans women, really to the marches that followed demanding liberation. I want to be clear, Stonewall was not the first moment of protest from Black and Brown LGBTQ plus people. It was not the first protest from drag queens and sex workers and those who were involved in the LGBTQ plus movement, right? We have Cooper's Donuts uprising, we have Black Cat Tavern, but Stonewall really was the pivotal moment, the catalyst that sparked why we have Pride Month, which started 1 year after the Stonewall uprising, right? So, it was always about resisting police brutality, systemic oppression, and silence. And under this current administration, when we're seeing rollbacks of LGBTQ plus IA rights, in healthcare and education, and even our freedom to exist and organize, we really recognize that pride as a protest is more important now than ever. So, it's always a reminder of our joy and our fight, and our collective freedom, and a reminder that those things are interconnected and intertwined.
And also a reminder of our collective power, both of people in the LGBTQIA community and of allies. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the joy of collective power and how that joy of collective power, of being in movement, of being in protest, of being in a parade, of having beautiful flags, of dancing, is actually adds up to narrative change and national change and is a form of protest. Can you share a little bit about that?
I mean, all of those things are really important because what it allows me to reconcile with is the fact that despite obviously things being hard for many marginalized communities and despite us experiencing things, I mean, many of us have been here before, just to be clear, right? Many marginalized communities have been in this moment before, maybe not the exact same way. But when I talk to communities, it's very different. When I talk to Black elders, many of them have kind of just stated, actually, we've been here before. This is probably a shock to many other people. And when I talk to some people like Black elders, a lot of them are always reminding us about the power of joy, about the power of collectivity, about collective power writ large. And that creates a narrative that's important for us to all tap into. And I would argue, in and of itself, is protest, in and of itself, is a response to freedom and liberation, and really figuring out the world that we ultimately want to see, right? It's one thing when everything that you're thinking about is rooted in oppression, which we understand why that needs to be the case. It's another thing when you can kind of understand the oppression you're going through, and another thing to recognize that oppression and also mirror it was how do you actually create messaging? How do you actually create narrative change? How do you actually create movement building? How do you create policy and advocacy work, all rooted in joy and collective power?
I love that you talked about collective liberation and what's happening right now in the United States of America, and with increasing LGBTQI legislation across the country that is negative. What are the most critical ways that allies can show up and support the community right now?
There are many ways allies can show up, and I think it's always important to recognize that allies are needed in this movement and in this moment. So speaking out against harmful bills, not just online, but actively showing up, whether it's school board meetings, the workplace, in our state legislature, right? Allies can also donate to local queer and trans organizations, especially led by those at the intersection of multiple marginalized identities. Check on your LGBTQ plus friends and family, right? Don't just say I'm here if you need me. Proactively offer support and vote, right? Vote at every level. Vote at every level. It is really important. I think it's also important though that allies recognize part of their role is really actually naming the thing, being vocal when they hear something like a statement that someone makes that's supposed to be a joke, but it's not a joke, right? I think one of the most important ways that I have seen and felt allies show up was speaking up on behalf of people, whether they were in the room or not. Right. And so there are real tangible ways allies can show up and show up beyond just June. Right. It's really important that we're having this conversation outside of June because the reality is a lot of people, a lot of organizations, even well meaning ones, they talk about LGBTQ people and staff, et cetera, in June and think, hands clean, I'm done. I've done my job. But it's not true if you're not actually thinking about how to actually discuss LGBTQ people and ways to be allies outside of 1 month out of the 12.
Yeah, I mean, good point. There are 12 months in the year, you all. I love that you raised that. And speaking of that, you gave some good practical tips that we can all use right now. Speak up when you hear somebody saying a joke that is completely inappropriate, no matter who's in the room, and more. I'm wondering if you can walk us through, speaking of more, some practical steps that our listeners can take to be even more effective allies in their workplaces, in their schools, and in local communities in this critical time right now.
So first, educate yourself. Don't just expect queer, trans, and non-binary people to do all of the teaching. I used to love to say go to Google, but that's also not that helpful, if I'm being honest too, because where you can find helpful things, you can also find harmful things. And so, but I do think there's a level to, something to be shared around what does it mean to actually say, what are more things I can learn about LGBTQ people in schools? What are LGBTQ books I can read, right? There are definitely resources that we can really reflect on and think about. So, one, educate yourself. Second, again, this goes back to my last point, but challenge anti LGBTQ plus language or behavior when you hear it even if it's uncomfortable. And I would argue, especially when it's uncomfortable, right? Like if you are only speaking up in times of comfort, I argue that makes you a spectator, not an ally, right? So it's really important that we lean into our muscles of healthy tension to have conversations that may be uncomfortable. And I would say third, push for really inclusive policies, whether it's gender neutral bathrooms, pronoun use, partner benefits, safe spaces for queer youth, inclusive policies at the workplace. And the last thing we have to remember that allyship is a verb, right? It is something that you do. It is something that you are being. It's a daily action, right? Not a one-time singular statement. And so we have to remember that allyship takes action. It is something that people say you are. It's nothing you can say that you are yourself. And so those are some of the things I would like practical steps I would say we can that listeners can move forward with.
I love all of those. I love allyship as a verb. I want to dive in a little bit more to practical steps and talk about parents.
Mm.
Parent people, parents. Parents is often one of the closest forms of allyship. Can you give some advice for parents? How can parents support young people?
I'm so glad that you made the comment around parents and allyship because parents can either be your first ally or your first opponent. And the reality is, I really hope that parents and listeners know that one of the first things you have to do is listen to LGBTQ plus children, right? Whether they're your own, whether they're people who you may be in community with, right? Because it does take a village. And so listen to LGBTQ plus young people, to your children, believe them, affirm who they are, right? So use their pronouns and chosen names. Again, education, educate yourself so you know how to advocate for them, whether it's in schools, with family, or in our communities. And then, you really have to think about how are we going to make our home a safe place when they don't have to hide, where they don't have to hide, right? Sometimes you have LGBTQ plus young people whose safest space is school because their home is not safe for them. And so I always want parents to think about how do you make sure that your place is safe for them, especially now where we see the direction the administration is forcing schools to go. And so, and if you don't know something, it's okay, right? It's okay to say, I'm learning, but I love you and I'm here for you no matter what. Those affirming messages mean a lot to LGBTQ plus young people.
I love that, everybody. I love that. I'm learning. I'm here for you, and I'm ready to learn more. I mean, that's the other
Yeah,
part. Because hopefully we're all continuously learning humans, as we
absolutely.
must be, because things are always changing. We only have about 2.5 minutes left, and I have a double question for you. Double
Okay.
question. My double question is, what action, are there any specific actions you want listeners to take? And what's bringing you hope in this moment of really hard times?
Ooh, actions to take. So one, of course, I post a lot on social media about these things, about tips and tricks, about what it means to be an ally. So my first action is if you're on your phone or your laptop, go to Instagram and go to preston.mitchum or go to prestonmitchum.com. I send out newsletters, etc., about all of these issues. So that's really important. What's bringing me hope? Honestly, a lot of things are bringing me hope. I mean, one, I get married this October, so that is always bringing me hope. And so, yeah, the planning part is never so fun all the time, but my future husband is bringing me hope. I would also say what's bringing me hope are young people, young people, young people, young people. Young people will absolutely create the conditions where that the world needs to see. And I've believed this for a long time, and I continue to believe it today. When I think through how people get so bold, so progressive, so imaginative, so visionary, those things are rooted in young people, right? Young people are unafraid to demand what they know is best for them. And that is the thing that is always going to bring me hope. They do not take no for an answer, and they shouldn't. And so when I think about the direction of our world, of society, of community, young people, the youth are really bringing me the most hope right now.
Young people are rising. If we have young people listening, if we have parents listening, and I know we have both young people and parents, are there any organizations or places that you recommend they go to find community and support?
This is where I say start local. A lot of things that people are thinking about are locally run. So whether it's a local community center in DC, for example, we have the DC Center for the LGBTQ community, but we also have organizations for trans and non-binary people in particular, like Smile, among others. And so, where there is a local community, please feel free to look them up. I don't care if the city can be small, and I've seen organizations that are dedicated to LGBTQ plus youth. So that's just a really important place there. And then also, online is a very interesting space because data show that LGBTQ plus young people find online spaces to be both safe and unsafe, right? Unsafe because of many messages and languages they can receive that doesn't feel affirming to them, but really safe for them and an experience of my own because that is where a lot of them find community. That's where I found community as a young queer person. And so there are definitely different, I always say be cautious, but be cautiously optimistic, right? Because online spaces also can become communal spaces for many people too. We just have to make sure that we are safely accessing those environments.
Excellent advice, expert advice. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being with us. Thanks for spending time. Preston Mitchum, you all follow him on social media. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to take a quick break, but stick around. Next up, we're talking about something that you know intuitively, but now we have a study to show it. Your unpaid labor makes money. We'll be back in a quick moment. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have a very exciting, fast-moving show and segment for you today. We are joined right now by Kate Robbins and Jessica Mason of the National Partnership for Women and Families. Woo! Welcome, Kate and Jessica.
Hey,
Great to be here.
hey. So happy to be here.
I'm excited you're here because we are doing an example of a report about listeners, viewers, am in the back of Uber going to the airport to help Nana carry her bags. This is a very exciting moment. So if you see a seatbelt and you see my camera moving up and down, it is because we are in a kinetic moment, shall we say. And then we are going to talk about a new report. If Americans were paid for their caregiving, they would earn more than $1.1 trillion. I'm really excited about this conversation. First, Kate, your new report explains that Americans provide what we just said, over 1.1 in unpaid care annually, and that women provide the majority of unpaid care. Surprise, surprise, not. How does this massive economic contribution remain so invisible in our national economic discussions that are happening every day? What's happening? Kate, you first.
Yes, no, it is a huge figure, isn't it? And the reality is America really runs on care. So trying to make that visible is so important for the conversations that we're having. So what we show here is that our analysis is taking a broad look at adults in the US who spend time caring for and helping the people in their lives. In fact, just what you're doing at this moment, Kristen. And we found that Americans spend about 250 hours each year on caregiving. And women spend even more than men. So unpaid care is something that really holds our communities together and keeps our society and our economy running strong, but it is taken for granted. And that invisibility, the invisibility of what does it mean to raise the next generation, to fill in the gaps in the healthcare system, to support disabled people living independently in the community and participating in the economy, that continues to be invisible, in part because care has so historically been quote unquote women's work, and particularly the labor of women of color, especially Black women in our country. And that is translating to this unpaid care being unvalued and unseen for so many people, despite how important it is for our economy overall.
I'm so glad you wrote this report and you just raised these critical points, and that is the paid and unpaid work of care. So the unpaid work of care, which again adds up to be 1.1 trillion with the T dollars, is so huge. It is so huge. And care is the work that makes all other work possible. And the unpaid work of care is so devalued that devaluation follows women into the labor force. So we have a situation right now where moms are earning significantly less than non-moms. In fact, being a mom is a greater predictor of wage and hiring discrimination than gender. And exactly what you said, moms of color experiencing compounded wage hits, racism, to the extent that Latina moms just 47 cents to just 52 cents to white dad's dollar. It's not okay. So
No.
This report is so important because it's not just about the unpaid work of care that's getting devalued. It's also, when you roll into the labor force, that devaluation follows women and moms in particular and people of color around. Jessica, what is your take on what's happening, and was it cathartic to write this report?
It was a little bit, yeah. And as Kate mentioned, our goal really was to try to draw attention to and make visible this care and the importance that it plays in our society, in our economy, in our families, in our everyday lives. Because we spend a lot of time in sort of economic policy world looking at these other metrics like the GDP and the inflation index and all these other things. And those are all important, but they're missing this huge piece of our economic lives. And as you were talking about, the time that caregivers spend, and that's a lot of time for women, really has huge ramifications for their ability to be in the paid workforce, to increase their hours. It affects the breaks that women, especially mothers, often have to take in and out of the workforce. And that itself then has ripple effects throughout their lives and their careers and their earning power. For example, we know that mothers lose nearly $300,000 on average in earnings and retirement benefits due to the impact of caregiving on their employment. That's a huge amount of money, even though every moment they're out of work, they're doing important stuff for their families and for our communities and for our economy. And those are impacts that are, sorry, I'm going to keep going. Those are impacts that are especially challenging for women of color. And we wanted to make sure that that did not go unnoticed in our report as well. Because of the larger wage gaps that you just mentioned, Kristen, we also see that women of color often spend more time on unpaid caregiving. So they're getting this double burden. For example, on the average day, Asian women spend the most time caregiving, nearly 1 hour per day. And that's followed by Latinas at 52 minutes on average. And that adds up to thousands of dollars in unspent caregiving time over the course of the year.
And when we're talking about the economy, one of the things that's so interesting is, of course, it's hard to add up. Thank you for adding up that it's 1.1 trillion, again, I'm going to say it 80 times, dollars in unpaid care work into our economic national system. But when you look at what would happen when we follow those wage discriminations over into the paid labor force, we see that if there was pay parity, if we didn't have this wage hit due to care, we would actually increase our GDP significantly by between 3 and 5% and lift, half of kids plus more out of poverty. So it's a really big deal. Can you talk a little bit about what types of labor did you count in the $1.1 trillion? Because a lot of people don't realize that when you are a caregiver, you have like 800 jobs.
You certainly do have 800 jobs, Kristen. And there's actually quite a few things that we've counted here. So to be very clear, this is all the caregiving that folks do for family, maybe family that they live with, but it's also caregiving they're doing for loved ones, neighbors, people who are maybe not necessarily living with them, but they're supporting in their lives. So this can be everything from babysitting for your niece and nephew. It can be taking your mom home after she's had surgery. It could be helping a great aunt sort through her pills and make medical appointments and navigate insurance paperwork. So it's literally a whole range of things that people do, and women especially are doing across so many people in their lives. And it really does help make sure that businesses run, make sure that schools run. It's really essential for so many people across the country.
And Jessica, were there any jobs that you were thinking of as Kate was sharing the unpaid labor jobs?
Gosh, I think a lot about all of that administrative labor that goes into healthcare these days, all of that form filling, all of that pill counting, and often, the person you're helping out is, if someone's undergoing surgery or chemo or something, like they're not in the best frame of mind to be dealing with like a million calls to the insurance company. And so this is really important work that sort of helps keep people healthy and also makes our healthcare system function. And so we really need to recognize the importance of this caregiving.
And the other thing that I think is important to recognize, and U.S. Secretary Madeleine Albright is the first person who told this to me. Yes, I'm name dropping. She was the first woman U.S. Secretary, and she actually stayed home with unpaid labor for 3 kids and raising them, and then went into the professional labor force. And so I asked her, what did you learn from being a stay-at-home parent that helped you be, one of the top people in our government's history who's a mom? And she said she learned more about international negotiations by negotiating between kids who were fighting over toys and sandbox. And then she went on to say she learned more about double, triple tasking when all of a sudden there was, like a plumbing emergency, as kids needed lunch, as, somebody was knocking at the door, as all of a sudden there was also somebody needed new shoes because their shoes didn't fit anymore. And, the list goes on of the ways that moms double, triple, quadruple task. And I think that's one of the other things that we discount is actually the learning, the skills that come from the unpaid work of care. And did you all look into that?
We didn't look into that.
Or go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, I was going to say, we didn't look into that specifically, but it's very true, as you say. You know, there's a variety of ways in which people learn these skills that help them navigate not only their personal lives, but also their professional lives. So, you know, the bureaucracy navigation that Jessica was lifting up just a few moments ago, who has also not done that at work, right? And so you're doing multiple things at the same time. You're learning how to prioritize and strategize. And that has implications, you know, not only for the paid work that women are doing, and moms in particular, but also for their commitments to their community, the volunteer work, the work in their synagogues and churches, and maybe even in the PTA and other sort of community organizations. All of that skill building pays, that they learn from this unpaid care, pays off in other aspects of their work, but again, is so often unrecognized.
And I want to get to a big, important question, and that is, what are the solutions? And Jessica, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So we think both a lot about solutions and about what all of this means in our present moment. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention that, you know, the first 6 months of the Trump administration have been a real disaster for caregivers. This new law that Trump just signed back on the 4th of July will kick millions of people off of Medicaid. It paves the way for our disabled and older adults in our communities to be institutionalized rather than be able to age in place and live in their communities. It throws money at a really poorly designed paid leave tax credit rather than actually providing real paid family and medical leave to people. And this administration is working to cut wages for paid caregivers and to get the agencies that protect caregivers' rights at work, like the Family and Medical Leave Act. So we're in a really tough moment at the federal level when it comes to policies to help care. But we do have solutions, and we're working hard for them and making some progress. So I'll mention one that is near and dear to my heart, which is paid family and medical leave. And Kristen, I'm sure you've talked about many times on this podcast, but you know, we obviously are one of the few countries in the world without a national paid family leave program, but we have passed programs in a number of states that are working well and giving us a lot of lessons for the future. And so I see that as a real moment of hope and encouragement and an indication that we are at the moment when people are ready for real care infrastructure in this country. And I think, Kate, if you want to talk a little bit about childcare, which is such a huge issue.
How can we not talk about childcare? I mean, I think this is top of mind for so many parents, moms and dads around the country. How are they going to be able to afford to care for their kids? You know, we've seen increasing amount of disruptions for work, you know, because of childcare. And so it's a really essential area for us to focus on. You know, and the recent pieces in the Trump and congressional Republicans bill, even though there were some small improvements to childcare, they're not going to help workers. They're not going to help low-income families. So unfortunately, we can't be fooled about the current state of the world for childcare. But again, I think we see such tremendous movement at the state level. So I live in New Mexico, and New Mexico has made amazing strides in recent years, helping to care for kids, improving wages for caregivers. And I think it and other states have created a vision for what could this look like? And the answer is we can do so much, and we can do so much for our adults with disabilities and elderly adults. And so there are solutions and a vision for a positive future out there. We just need to reach for it. Oh, Kristen, we can't hear your great thoughts.
Studies show that when we pass policies like access to paid family medical leave, access to healthcare, access to childcare, that we actually lower the wage gaps, but also boost the economy, and taxpayers get back a massive return on investment. So everyone, I need you to do a couple of things. Join the National Partnership for Women and Families. Get involved, stay involved, and support. Fantastic organization. Read the report too. Also, make sure that you call your members of Congress and tell them to support care infrastructure policies. We all need them. Thank you so much for being on with us right now. Thanks for all you do. It was a joy talking with you, Jessica and Kate.
Thanks so much, Kristen.
Thanks, Kristen.
We're going to take a quick break. Don't go away. Next up, we're talking about a new gathering familiesfirstnow.org, and how you can get involved. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph-Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined right now by a spectacular, amazing nation-lifting guest, Alida Garcia of Care Can't Wait Action. Welcome, Alida.
Hello, hello, hello. So happy to be here with you, Kristen.
I'm happy / sad to be here with you because we are here together about a terrible moment in history. The Republican leadership in Congress and Donald Trump passed a betrayal bill that undercut Medicaid, it undercut SNAP, it undercut education, it undercut our economy. And there is a lot to be sad and upset about. But that was not the last word. The bill passage was not the last word. The people always have the last word, and the people are rising. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening and how people can get involved?
That's right, Kristen. I know for those of you at home, you're probably feeling frustrated and you start to lose hope. But I think one thing that we know is ain't no power like the power of the people. And so on July 26th, American families in every corner of the country are going to come together in peaceful marches, rallies, and events to say that our families come first and we will protect each other. And so there's going to be actions all across the country. You can find one in your neighborhood at www.familiesfirstnow.org. But we're really going to be shedding light on the impact that this horrible bill has on stripping, 17 million people's health care away and infusing massive amounts of cash to separating families through ICE, to harming food SNAP benefits for our children. And, enough is enough. And so we're really excited to be mobilizing with partners like Moms Rising and others on Saturday, the 26th.
And can you share that website again? Because, everybody who's driving is doing memorization. Please do not write this down while you're driving, but other people may be writing it down. What's the website again?
The good news is it's super easy to remember, familiesfirstnow.org. And if you go there, there'll be a find an event button. When you press that, it's going to auto-populate the event that is closest to you in your state. And if for some reason you live somewhere where you're not seeing one that's drivable distance from where you live, you can create one. And there's a button there to create one as well. I know recently I myself, with a bunch of mom friends, had a play date protest where we got all of our kids together and just made some rally signs to protest against the ICE abductions and family separations that were happening here in my home in Los Angeles. And so it really doesn't take much to build your own event. And if you don't see one, we really encourage folks to do that themselves, but to find a way to, have a family, an intergenerational moment. A lot of the policies that were passed in this horrific bill really attack our family structure and the safety and health of our families. And so we're really hoping that the 26th can be like a full family affair for everybody to come out together and, not just like the adults. We want to see kids out there playing. We want to see grandma and grandpa out there who rely on elder care and whatnot. And so, this is really a day for all of us to get involved together.
I'm really, really excited about July 26th. And when you say a day for families, I see families everywhere doing whatever works for them on that day to make some noise. So I love the examples that you had. You can also just get together, like you just said, for a family play date. Just invite a couple families to meet up at the local playground, make some signs together. On the website, there's some examples of slogans and signs that people can make. And then just, color your signs together and then hold them up, march them around, maybe have some music, maybe create some walk-up music for yourself. And, if you're doing extra credit, let your local press know, especially the local newspapers, especially the local outlets, that the people in our communities across the nation do not like the policies that the Republican leaders in Congress and Donald Trump are putting forward that cut our Medicaid, that cut our SNAP, that cut our schools, and importantly, that invested so much money, over $150 billion, into separating families, into human rights abuses, and into really terrifying, hardworking immigrants who are such important contributors to our families, to our economy, to our country. It is just not okay. And so people think, oh, is this going to make a difference? And we are here to say, yes, it makes a difference. polls are showing that during the discussion about this bill, when Republicans were bringing it up in Congress, that, you know, like only 20% of people knew what was going on. They weren't paying attention. 20% of people were paying attention to the fact that there is, you know, Medicaid under threat. Medicaid, by the way, covers 40% of all births, over 60% of all nursing home stays, 1 in 3 people with significant disabilities, the majority of rural hospitals, and many hospitals of all sizes across the country, the pipeline for medical doctors to become doctors, and more. So like undercutting Medicaid is undercutting me, you, and us. But people weren't able to pay attention during the time that this bill was being discussed. But then afterwards, as people have raised their voices, the latest CNN poll shows that the majority of people, when they find out about this, they really don't like this bill. So when you stand up, when you say, I don't like this, you're actually helping to build a national wave of change. You're helping to shift the national narrative. You're helping to let people who live in red, blue, and purple states know that the Republican leaders are breaking their promises to us. They are raising costs, not lowering costs. They're getting rid of healthcare, not expanding healthcare. And they're hurting our economy, our families, and our country. And I don't know if you want to share, Alida, about why each gathering, even if it's 2 people, adds up to make a big difference, and how. What are your thoughts?
Well, one thing about the 26th is that is the first day that members of Congress in the House of Representatives will be back home for an extended period of time. And over the summer, we call it August recess for those of us that do this work, but basically there's a summer break for members of Congress where the 26th is the first date for us to let them know that this is something that we're going to talk to them about, that they don't just get to go have summer break as usual, because they are actively trying to harm our families. And so this is day 1 in what we hope will be an ongoing conversation and movement to elevate the impact of this legislation on our families, because quite frankly, everyone has something at stake because of these policies that are passing. The costs are going to raise for the American public, whether or not you're on Medicaid for your own healthcare costs. The emergency rooms, whether or not you're on Medicaid, are going to be complicated and strained. Hospitals are going to close because of this bill. Families are going to be separated because of this bill. And so there's so much harm that is going to come out of this decision that they made. And the 26th is just the first day in us showing up that, you know what? You can do whatever you want, but we're the ones that are actually going to decide our families' futures. And that's why we're showing up on the 26th. We're going to find our event at familiesfirstnow.org, and we're going to rally together, as many rallies as it takes to continue to show the true voice of the American people that, in my opinion, is not currently being reflected by the United States Congress.
No, the Republicans in Congress are a small, vocal, very loud, disastrous force right now, and really undercutting our families, our economy, and our country. And so all of us showing up to speak out about what our contributions and our needs are is really important. And we need policies that reflect and respect who we are, and that allow us to build good lives, allow us to go to work and raise healthy kids, allow us to get fair pay so we can fuel the economy, which is, by the way, fueled by us, because we have a consumer fueled economy right now. And what is your hope for long-term engagement, Alida? We want people to get engaged on the 26th in whatever way they can, whatever fun way you can. And what about long-term? You talked a little bit about it, but what do you see happening in the future?
Well, I think one thing is this bill is about taking things away from us in order to give monies to the billionaire class. But what we actually deserve to lower costs for American families is a care infrastructure for all American families, whether that be paid family and medical leave when we have children or our family members get sick, whether that be affordable childcare and access to early education, whether that be affordable elder care for our parents and grandparents as that they age in the future. And they're not spending a dime to build that out. In fact, they're attacking the very minimum of what people have and making that even less. And so this is a long fight ahead to speak to our values of what our families truly need to lower costs for Americans across the country. And this is just step one, but we need folks to stay engaged. We need folks to then, be thinking about the midterms in 2026 and who do we truly want making the decisions now that we see how dangerous it can be when you have one party in power um, over all branches of government and how much risk that puts upon our families and their safety and their health for our futures. And so there's a long march ahead, and the 26th is just one step in that march, but hopefully it'll be a beautiful day that feels inspiring and safe and peaceful for everyone so that they understand that this is a true full family project that we're doing together to fight for all of the generations within our families, whether that's your chosen family, your immediate family at home, your neighborhood, your work family, whomever. We're choosing our families first, and whether or not Republicans like it, we're going to be showing up and being loud.
Showing up, being loud, reminding them that we're here. And you know what's interesting about this moment, Alida, or terrifying, both, is that when you look at the polls, Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Green Party people all agree that we need a care infrastructure by wide margins. Even 86% of Trump voters, for example, want paid family medical leave after a new baby arrives, want affordable childcare, want Medicaid, want home care workers and child care workers to receive living wages, but we have the opposite going on from Republican leaders inside the Beltway. So we have a moment where we can come together, we can expand who is rising up from our normal groups. We can say, hey, you person who may not have voted the same way that I voted, maybe you want to come to my little mini rally because we all know that we need health care. Everybody gets sick, no matter what political party they are, Democrat, Republican, or whatever. We all get sick and everybody needs a chance to get better. And when you look at who is going to be the most negatively impacted by these policies, yes, my hair is lighting on fire, it is actually the constituents, the Republican constituents of the Republicans who voted to take away health care. Actually, in those districts where there are more Republicans, there are also more people needing access to Medicaid. So this is a moment where people who are rising up on familiesfirstnow.org know that you're not alone. Know that the majority of people of all parties agree with you, and know that when you rise up with joy, with children, with passion, with persistence, that you're actually growing a movement and expanding it. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that idea too, Alida.
Well, I think sometimes the word protest can sound scary, right? Because we see images on our TV and we're like, "Oh, that's not for me." But this day is designed to be a family activity where everyone can actually uh, learn that speaking up and using our outside voices is for 5-year-olds, is for 40-year-olds, and is for 80-year-olds. And there's a way for us to build, to bring new folks in. And that's the real spirit of the 26. We want folks to not just reach out to your friends that are always with you at every city council meeting and every members of Congress office, but to think about those in your life that, may be a little hesitant to participate. They might not know that this movement has a big, big, big tent and welcomes them in it. And so this is really an open invitation to bring those in our lives who are looking, it could be a picnic. It could be you could have bubbles. Everybody loves some bubbles.
Oh, bubbles. I want bubbles. I need bubbles right now.
And I
That's
think
amazing.
you'd actually be really surprised when you put a megaphone in front of a 5-year-old, just how powerful and inspiring that can be. And so, this is really, people can make this what they want, but we really want to make sure that we're also inviting those that may not have ever felt that speaking up and speaking out is the right space and place for them to use their voices. Hopefully, Families First is the first of multiple invitations that we'll be giving out to those folks who are going to, in fact, be deeply impacted by these policies, but may not have ever received the type of invitation that felt right for their participation to fight back.
Thank you so much for being on, Alida. Thank you for all you do. Everybody go to familiesfirstnow.org. Get involved, stay involved. Thank you so much, Alida.
Thanks.
We're going to take a quick break. Don't go away. Next up, we're talking about your story, my story, our story, and how they can change the world for the better. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined right now by a spectacular guest, Hailey Adkisson, who is co-founder of Growing Juniper and Simply Complex Stories. We love complex stories, and also Juniper and Growing and all the things. And Hailey, of course, we love her too. Welcome, Hailey.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited that you're here because you are a powerful storyteller, a powerful narrative shifter, and we often don't talk enough about the importance of narrative shifting. And so to set the scene during this show, we've been talking about the Big Bad Betrayal Bill that was just signed into law by President Trump on July 4th of all insulting days. But one glimmer of hope through it was that Republican Senator Tillis of North Carolina voted no, as he should have. We wanted a no vote. This was a good vote, this no vote. And Tillis said it was the stories of moms locally sharing about how devastating the cuts to Medicaid would be to their families in North Carolina, which is what he represents, that changed his mind. So I'm wondering if you can share your story with our listeners and how you've seen the power of storytelling bridge divides and create understanding, like we just saw with Republican Senator Tillis.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me on. I love being able to share. I think storytelling and narratives are really powerful tools. So I live in Salem, Oregon, south of Portland, about 45 minutes south with my family. And to kind of give a backstory, I am a community college professor, so I teach communication, which helps my background. But in January 2020, our daughter Juniper was born. We call her Junie. And everything for about 6 months, she seemed like a healthy baby. We're a blended family, but she's our third kid, so this wasn't our first rodeo. And the pandemic happened and all of these things, but she was seemingly developing and healthy and happy. And then at about 6 months old, so almost exactly 5 years ago, late July of 2020, she started having seizures. And we didn't know they were seizures, but she was doing something that looked odd. Took her to our children's hospital up in Portland, and she was diagnosed with a rare form of pediatric epilepsy called infantile spasms, which she was having hundreds of seizures every single day. And when she wasn't having seizures, her brain was in chaos. And so that's really damaging towards a baby because they do so much developmental growth in that first year. And I say it's like static on a radio, like she wasn't able to take in the messages. So obviously at that point, our world exploded. Everything that we thought was going to be the norm shifted. And again, this was the height of the pandemic. So it was a very isolating time. Jump forward 5 years, she's 5.5 now. She unfortunately still has seizures every single day, multiple times a day. She's trialed over a dozen different medications. She's had 2 massive brain surgeries, various like holistic treatments and diets. And unfortunately, she still is medically complex. She's non-speaking and non-ambulatory, so she doesn't walk. So in the midst of all of that, it was very isolating because we were in a pandemic, and also in our local circle, we didn't have anyone that had children with disabilities, that had experience with epilepsy. And so I really turned to social media to build community and find other families that were like ours and other moms. And writing has always been really cathartic for me. And since I was very, very little, I would write stories. And so I wrote our story. I shared about myself. And through that, I was able to form connections with people, not only across the country, but across the world, other moms that were feeling very similar to me, that felt very isolated, very alone. It's a bizarre feeling like your world is falling apart and the rest of the world is continuing on without you. And so it was nice to have that comfort. And so the account and my story and Juniper's story has just grown over the past 5 years. And we continue to have opportunities to share and advocate about rare disease and disability and inclusion and all things like Medicaid cuts that impact our family.
Your story is so important and is so powerful and is so critical for people, especially elected leaders, to hear. And I'm wondering if you could also share with our listeners and our audience, how would these Medicaid cuts that are coming down the line impact your family? I think everybody needs to know what's happening individually because it's happening collectively at the same time too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, each state is obviously a little bit different on how things work and the impacts. And I think there's a big old question mark about what that's going to look like. So I'll speak, I'm in Oregon, so I can speak for Oregon. Luckily, we live in a state that has a great Medicaid program. And I think we are actually going to be, it's projected to be one of the hardest hit states in the country because we have so many families on Medicaid. And so while my family individually doesn't qualify for Medicaid because of income requirements, my husband and I both work full time. He has great insurance through the state of Oregon. There is a waiver program that states can opt into, and they decide how to kind of run it. And luckily, Oregon has chosen that they don't take income into account if you have a child with documented disabilities, and that child counts as an individual and qualifies for Medicaid. So since my daughter has been on Medicaid since she was about 2 or so, we haven't had a single medical bill since then. And she has dozens of hospital stays. She has appointments every single week. I mean, copays alone each month would be $100 to $200 minimum. There's been times that, for example, primary insurance has denied a piece of equipment, like a wheelchair, that Medicaid would step in and say, well, we'll cover it. And for those that don't know, medical equipment's very expensive. So her wheelchair was $15,000. Her medical stroller was $10,000. And we haven't had to pay anything. And so for us, losing Medicaid would have a huge impact on how our family functions. It means making choices of, well, do we go without that piece of equipment? Do we cut back on her therapies? Do we skip a medical appointment? Now, we have a lot of privilege because we still have primary insurance, because we still have jobs and a reliable source of income. So we know even with the cuts, our family will be okay. It would be devastating, but still okay. The bigger concern for me is that what people don't understand is, even though it's been, air quotes, assured that children with disabilities will not get kicked off of Medicaid, what people don't understand is that this is assuming the family of that child qualifies for Medicaid to begin with. So a perfect example, my family does not qualify for Medicaid. We qualify because of a waiver. If Medicaid funds are drastically cut, the state is going to have to make a decision of, do we continue to pay for all of these families on an optional waiver program? And even though Oregon is outstanding with many of their more liberal policies, that might be the case where they look and say, unless you're the highest needs, your child will no longer qualify. And so I think it's really misleading saying that, oh, a disabled child won't lose their care. Well, they likely would if your family does not qualify for Medicaid to begin with.
And that's such an important point. And 1 in 3 people with significant disabilities in America are covered by Medicaid. And that's another important point, because when we listen to stories, we realize that you're not alone. None of us are alone. And that our stories show a pattern of, when this many people are facing the same types of struggles at the same times, we need national solutions, not an epidemic of blame, which I really think is what we have going on with the Trump administration and Republican leaders in Congress. They're kind of wanting to blame people for being in difficult situations of which we have no control. And so sharing our stories is critical to both let elected leaders know what's really going on, let media know what's really going on, and one another know that we're not alone. And even so, many people, especially women and moms, often have a critical voice that tells them that their story isn't, quote, important enough, even though their story has so much value and can have so much impact. And this is especially true around difficult, challenging, sad, frustrating, and depressing topics. What techniques do you recommend for helping people find and embrace their authentic voice and narrative and share it?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of layers to that question, right? We've been told to, as women, we're often told to stay quiet and not complain and not do these things. So I think there's a lot of layers to that. But I also want to recognize that sharing is a very vulnerable choice. Like, opening up about what your family is experiencing is vulnerable. You open yourself up then to opinions, and these opinions are can be really hurtful, especially if they're coming from family or friends that have radically different views than you. So it is a choice to share. And everyone has different levels of comfort with that. For me, sharing publicly has been oddly affirming and healing, but I recognize that I'm kind of an oddball out with that. I think starting with your immediate circle, speaking up, even with your family who doesn't understand, for example, what the impact of Medicaid cuts would be, or doesn't understand, we have a tendency, again, I'm a communication scholar, so I'm always looking at that lens, but when people say, oh, how are you doing? How are you guys handling things? You go, fine, how are you? Right? We silence when we're actually struggling. And I've made a choice to admit that, you know what, sometimes this is really hard. Sometimes I'm having a difficult day. And that has helped me build much more authentic connections with people to go, actually, things aren't great right now. And it's not me complaining, which I think as women, as moms, we never want to be seen as complaining, but it's me saying, if I don't speak up and say this is difficult, if I don't admit that we are not getting the services and the support that my daughter needs, the caregiver support, the Medicaid, the healthcare support, if I don't use my voice to do that, if I don't start saying, this is really hard, nothing is going to change. Nothing. And so without moms speaking up and even starting with their immediate circle of sharing and admitting the challenges that we face, we're never going to get those support. That at the end of the day, forget me, but it needs to help my children. It needs to help my daughter. And that's what I think is always my guiding compass of, I can't fix my daughter in regards to healing. I mean, she's amazing. I don't care if she walks or talks. The girl has so much sass, she doesn't need words. But as regarding her epilepsy, I hit this point where I realized I can't heal her. I can't fix her medically. So what am I going to do to gain some of that control? I'm going to try and make the world kinder. I'm going to try and make the world inclusive. I'm going to make sure that she has the best healthcare she possibly can. I'm going to make people see her, because disability is something that is still very hidden and shushed and not talked about. And so that has given me control in helping my daughter and reclaiming that by being able to share our story.
That's so powerful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We only have a minute left. And I have a question that you could answer for 10 hours, and I would still love listening to you if you answered for 100 hours. And I'm wondering, what would you say in closing to our listeners about the power of using your platform? You talked a little bit about it, and reaching and expanding your circle of influence, the power that we have nationally and in community when we share your platform.
Yeah.
What's
Well,
your advice?
I always joke, because I never set out to be a content creator or influencer, and I still kind of blush and get very awkward when people actually mention and acknowledge that. So that was never my purpose. And I always toe this line of, I never want to exploit my daughter. And so I think there's also, when you're talking about things impacting children, there's this balance. For me, it's also looking at adults with disabilities. It's turning to the communities that have this great, strong voice and giving them, I'm not speaking on their behalf, but elevating them and finding a way to craft a message that you can disagree with someone, but you can still find common ground and understanding.
Thank you so much for being on. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. This was great.
Thank you. Well, that's it for our show today. Thanks so much for tuning in as we tackle the top topics facing our nation in a way that requires the most boring disclaimer in the history of the planet Earth. Here goes. Views expressed on this show are those of the individual speakers and should not be attributed to Moms Rising, to this station, or to any news or social media service that may disseminate a recording of this show to the public or to any segment of the public. Boom! We'll catch you next week. Next one. We have to take a quick break from this conversation, but we'll dive back in where we left off in a moment. We're diving in where we left off from this conversation. Thanks for sticking with us. Did I do it all?
I think we're good.
I did it!
Good job.
Thank you. I'll send you the picture that Bill sends.
All right. Have fun with Nana.
Spousal humor moment. He thought this was very funny. All right. Thank you.
Take care. Have a great week.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.